Welcome to the Love Your Story podcast. Thanks for joining us in kicking off 2024. A couple quick New Year's announcements before we get into the interview with Nick Shaw today about the death of his son at Big Sky, Montana. And I'll be quick so we can get right into the good stuff. So first announcement is that I am changing up the format a little for 2024. As you know, we do an episode every other week, so 2 a month. And the first episode of the month is going to be staying with the regular format, like today's show, where we share real life stories and talk about the navigation of them, the learning, etc. And the second episode of the month is going to be what I'm calling the Love Your Story Quick Chat. This is going to be one inspirational idea in 15 minutes or less. Now, I'm doing this because I have enjoyed little shows where I can get an idea to ruminate on during the day, even when I just have a minute to listen to a show. My commute into my office isn't very long. It's like 10 minutes. So if there's some of the shorter shows, I really appreciate during that time. So I'm going to provide that same thing for you too. So we're going to do that format throughout the entire year. So the second announcement for the new year is that I now have a voicemail on my website, so I can hear from you more. The website is www.loveyourstorypodcast.com, and on the homepage, there's this small picture of a microphone down in the bottom right corner. Just click on that and you can tell me what you liked or didn't like about an episode, share your thoughts, whatever you want. Share your own experiences about one of the shows we did. Anyway, it's there for you. So I'd love to hear from you, and I will reach out and answer everyone who reaches out to me. So let's get started. Today's show takes us into the story of the death of a 9-year-old boy after a ski accident at Big Sky, Montana. The tragedy, as you would expect, brought his parents to their knees on a path that none of us want to walk. But Nick Shaw, today's guest, sought meaning as the lifeline to hold on to as he moved forward, and part of his healing process involved putting it down in writing. I understand that. He's sharing the lessons that he learned, and lessons not only of how to traverse this space, but lessons he learned from his son that he realized after his son's passing. So stay tuned as he shares his story of what happened with his son and what happened with his family. And then we're going to discuss part of his book. His book is called My Teacher, My Son, Lessons on Life, Loss, and Love. Stories are our lives in language. Welcome to the Love Your Story podcast. I'm Lori Lee, and I'm excited for our future together of telling stories, evaluating our own stories, and lifting ourselves and others to greater places because of our control over our stories. This podcast is about empowerment and giving you, the listener, ideas to work with in making your stories work for you. Story power serves you best when you know how to use it. Nick Shaw, William's father, an accomplished executive coach, and the author of My Teacher, My Son, joins us today to share his story and the things that he's learned along the way. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Very happy to be here. And looking forward to talking to you and your audience.
To our full big discussion. I wanted to start out with a quick review of your book. This is from Kelly McGonigal, PhD. Is it a she or a he?
She.
She is a research psychologist at Stanford University, and she writes, quote, "It seems impossible that a book about unimaginable grief could offer so much hope. Yet, that is the gift of My Teacher, My Son." With breathtaking honesty, Nick Shaw shows how love, joy, and continued connection coexist with loss, change, and challenge. The courage of Nick's self-reflection empowers each of us to find a way forward. A truly heart-empowered read. Very high praise, Nick. Very high praise. And I really like this idea of the coexisting of the good things, love, joy, continued connection, coexisting with loss, change, and challenge. So we'll get to that. But let's start with your story. I finished your book last week. very moving, but none of the listeners know who you are yet. So let's just start from that space. You and your family are getting ready to go on your ski vacation, or maybe you're already there. Just go ahead, pick up and tell us about you and your family and that day.
Absolutely. So I live in Massachusetts with my family, and in February 2019, we had school vacation, so we always would go away on ski vacations. I grew up skiing, and skiing was a big part of my life, and it's something that I wanted to do with my family. And my son William, who at the time was 9, was an avid skier. He kind of wanted to be like Dad, and so he got into it. He was on the ski racing team at our local mountain, and so he was really passionate about it as well. And it's really something that bonded us. And then my younger son, Kai, was just starting out in his journey as a skier. He was 6 at the time. And so, like we always did around this time of year, we always take vacation out to the Western United States, to the Rocky Mountains, to do a ski trip in one of the resorts out there. And this year, we went back to Big Sky, Montana, where we'd gone the year before because we really loved it. It was a Tuesday of the vacation, so a couple of days in. And what started out as an absolutely gorgeous, magical day, beautiful conditions, perfect weather. We got out. I was going to go out and ski on my own for a little bit, and then my kids went to ski school, and then I was going to meet up with William and some of our friends from our town and ski to the top of the mountain, where some of the more challenging runs were. And we tried to do this a year before, but something happened. We never made it. So William was really excited to get up there. Because, for a kid, 9-year-old to ski sort of the Black Diamonds, that's like a big deal.
I was impressed when I was reading the book at his scale. We're big skiers too. And for a 9-year-old to do a double Black Diamond, that was.
Yeah, he was a good skier. And so we did it. We got to the top, we skied down, and it was amazing. I mean, I love skiing. It is a passion sport for me. And so to have that moment, to see my son thriving and loving it, it was, one of the proudest moments of my life. And he had the run of his life, having a blast. I actually filmed the whole thing on a GoPro. And so, we did it. We conquered the mountain.
Yay!
Yeah. And, the plan all along was to do a couple runs up at the top with our family friends. And then we were going to meet my wife, Susie, and our younger son, Kai, because they were skiing at sort of the easier part of the mountain. We were going to ski as a family for the rest of the day. So William and I had to peel off from the group and make our way to the bottom. We somehow got lost, or I took a wrong turn. Mountains can be confusing sometimes. And we ended up on what's called a catwalk. And for those of you who don't know, a catwalk is effectively just a pretty flat road that kind of winds its way up the mountain. It's just kind of an easier way to the bottom. And so William and I were on this catwalk making our way to the bottom. Off the side of the hill off the catwalk, it's a bit steeper, and there's trees and deep powder snow. And I was about 10 or 15 feet in front of William because my weight, carried me a little bit faster than William. And honestly, on these types of runs, you just literally just point your skis downhill and glide down. And I even called my wife. I'm like, hey, we're 5 minutes from the bottom, because we were. And as I was making, the road curved, and as I was making the curve, all of a sudden a skier came whizzing past me. He said, hey, is that your kid who went into the woods? And so I, immediately stopped. Was like, okay, I totally expected, okay, William maybe caught an edge, was stuck in the powder snow off the side of the trail. So I stopped, I took my skis off, and then proceeded to walk back up the hill, fully expecting to see William kind of grappling to get out of the sort of heavy snow on the side there. When I walked up the mountain, he was nowhere to be found. It was really quite eerie because everything had gone dead quiet. And there was no sign of him anywhere. Now, normally when a skier goes off sort of a groomed slope into powder snow, you either see their tracks or an impression where their body might have fallen, but there was nothing.
Yeah, that's weird.
So it was very weird. It literally was like he just disappeared into thin air. And so I said, okay, well, I need to go look for him. I yelled his name. I was, doing everything to try to locate him. And then eventually kind of went into the woods myself. But after probably 5 feet into the woods, I was sunk down to my chest in powder snow.
Wow, that's some deep powder.
It was deep powder, and there was tree wells everywhere. Which tree wells are holes that form around the trunks of trees, and then powder snow kind of makes this well kind of a formation.
Now you don't
And so
want
I
to
had to
fall
get
in
out
the
of there
well.
because
You'll suffocate.
now I was, yeah, that's the risk when you fall into a tree well, you can suffocate if you can't get out. So I had to get out because there was risk for me at that point. And I eventually made my way out and flagged down a mountain employee. And then eventually we called the ski patrol and a search ensued. So I stayed there for a little bit, but then the ski patrol, their reaction was, well, there's no tracks here, so you must have skied by you. And so they said, go down the bottom mountain and see if you can find him. And so I was calling my wife, telling her to look for him. I went to the bottom, looked for him. I was joined by then a female ski patroller, and we were kind of looking in the lodge, looking in the lines. And it was getting later in the day, probably 3:30ish. And, it was February, so the sun was starting to set a bit. It's getting colder. And then just as I came out of the lodge, I heard the walkie-talkie of the ski patrol start coming to life with chatter. And they said, found but unresponsive. So they found William, but he was unresponsive. And I remember that was just like a gut punch. I just fell to my knees. I just kind of like felt nauseous. Like the wind was knocked out of me.
Before that, did you even think that was a possibility? Like, he was such an accomplished skier, to have something happen off a cat track just is so unlikely,
No, exactly. No, I mean, again, I was in front of him. I thought nothing about the fact that I was in front of him. Like if I'm on a steeper, more challenging run, I'll be behind him so I can see where he is. And if he falls, I can help him. But, on a catwalk, I didn't. It was about as low risk as it gets in skiing.
Right.
So I, as soon as that happened, then they put me on a snowmobile and drove me up to the ski patrol clinic, where they would take him for treatment. And, at that point I was like, okay, found unresponsive. That's concerning, but you still have some hope that he'll be able to be treated. So I went to the ski patrol clinic, waited there. They kind of brought me into a waiting room, and I was just kind of, it was torturous just to wait and not know.
How long did you have to wait?
It's a good question. Honestly, the timing of that day is so murky. It could have been 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20. I really don't know. It seemed like forever, to be honest with you. Eventually they brought him in. But actually right before that happened, I heard a helicopter outside. So I was like, okay, helicopter, that means maybe he's badly hurt, but they'll take him in for treatment down in Bozeman, Montana, where there's a bigger hospital. That gave me a glimmer of hope. They brought him in. I didn't see him. They kind of kept me away from the entrance because they didn't want me to see him. So all the commotion came in. They brought him into a treatment room and continued to wait. And then again, not sure how much time had passed, but then the doctor finally came out and he said, "I'm sorry." And that was that's when the worst possible thing that can happen to a parent is to find out that your child is dead. And I don't even quite remember what my reaction was. I think I was just in shock and numb.
But what had happened to him, Nick?
It's a great question. I to this day don't know what happened to him. I don't know what caused him to veer off a relatively flat road, off the side of that road, and then obviously he hit a tree. So something caused him to veer off a flat road, turn almost perpendicular turn, and then ski off the side of the hill and then go right into a tree. I don't know what caused him to do that, though. Unless I can find that skier who skied past me, I'll never know.
That's what I was going to say. Do you wonder if the skier that skied past you had something to do with him losing?
Could be, or who knows?
Or?
It's something I've thought of a lot, and I even sometimes wonder, do I even want to know? To be honest with you, I don't. So I don't know what caused him to go off the side of the mountain, off that side of that slope. He was going pretty fast, and he was airborne because there were no tracks, right? So he went airborne and then hit a tree, and
which is also super interesting because cat tracks, there's no jumps, there's nothing to get you airborne unless you're just dropping off the side and you're going fast enough. So that must have been what happened.
Exactly. I mean, that's the only plausible thing, right? Because again, the no tracks is if he was not going fast enough, he would have just his skis would have just gone down that slope and we would have seen tracks. But so he just went off the hill and hit a tree. Now, the one silver lining is that the coroner's report said he died on impact. So my biggest concern
No
until I
suffering.
found that news out was suffocation, and could I have gotten to him sooner and helped him? So,
oh, Nick, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was. It's about as awful as it gets. The waiting, the not knowing. Having to confront that kind of loss as a parent is not something you ever prepare yourself for.
So, where was your wife at this point?
So she had gone back to the cabin we rented to see if he somehow skied there. She was with our family friend, the wife of our, the mother of our family friends. They had gone back to the cabin to see if he was there. And then I called her when I found out that William had died, and I just said, "You got to get over here." I didn't tell her he had died because I just didn't want to do it over the phone. And so I just said, "You got to get over here," and and so she eventually got to the clinic, and she came in, and I was worried because I didn't know how she was going to react. At this point, I was consumed by guilt. It's my fault. I was with him. Could I have done more to save him? Like, all that stuff was churning in my head, and having to face her and then eventually face my younger son, Kai, was just tearing me apart. But she eventually got to the clinic, and, when I told her, we were probably about 10 feet apart, and, as expected, she just crumbled to the ground and just, broke down. And I quickly went over to her, and when I sort of helped her to her feet, she did one of the most selfless things anyone could do, and I think it's one of the most amazing parts of the story. Is she put her hands on my shoulders, looked me in the eye, and said, "It's not your fault." And and I say this in the book, it's one of those fork in the road moments, right? That like sort of set us on a course towards healing, and as individuals and as a family, but to have that presence of mind amidst that kind of pain and suffering, she knew what I needed to hear. She knew how hard I was going to be in myself, and to just find it within herself to do that is just one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced.
What a good wife. It could have gone very differently.
Absolutely. And it would have been understandable had it gone differently, right? I mean, it's
sure.
But she chose that path, and
human response, and think how different the future could have been with something like that, how much more difficult that could have been.
Absolutely. So it was an amazing thing, and
a big moment, one of those star moments in life, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we are forever. I mean, we were bonded before, but this has bonded us so much more. So,
well, that brings up an interesting point, which is when we go through these things, we can choose the bitterness or we can choose the better. And the choosing the better is that option to choose the lessons, to choose the meaning, to take these moments like this precious moment that your wife gave you, and to realize the beauty that comes from that, right? That couldn't have happened if the situation hadn't have happened. And so there are, despite the darkest moments, there are always pinpoints of light that we can focus on. And what we focus on determines the future, determines our bitterness or our betterness. And so with you in dealing with this devastating loss, you chose to look for these lessons. Can you tell us, let's say, maybe your top 3 lessons that you have learned from this?
One of the biggest lessons I've taken away from this, is just around the fragility of life. When you lose your child, the concept of mortality becomes so real for you, right? I mean, I think most of us conveniently push our mortality to the side, and because
Sure.
we're maybe not close to it yet, and so it's like it'll happen, but it's far off into the distance. When you lose your child, there's no looking away from that fact, and so, and what it was a split second. I mean, he was 10 feet behind me. We were 5 minutes from the bottom, and in the matter of a second,
Everything changed. Yeah.
And so with that, I think, given that we have this one life that live, and it can literally be taken in a nanosecond, one of the biggest lessons is we have to be more intentional about how we choose to live our lives. We have to pause more and actually smell the roses and get off the proverbial hamster wheel, which I was on, by the way, from a career perspective, and focus on what matters. I mean, I'm not saying you should be irresponsible and,
Sure.
still have responsibilities in life, but I think many people get caught up in the hustle and bustle, the busyness. Our culture is all about that. It's, the busier you are, the more successful you are. And
we love that at Love Your Story. That's what this is all about, is intentional living. That's our catchphrase. So you're speaking to the
good. Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
To the group that gets that.
Yeah. And it is about intentional living. I think, and for me, that meant pausing. I took a 6-month leave of absence, and that pause saved our family. I mean, I could have easily gotten back on the horse to distract myself with work, but pausing to me was the right thing to do. And it allowed me to process everything and make sense of it and learn from it. And
can I read the quote from your book? You say, quote, "I took a 6-month leave of absence from work to be with Susie and Kai and to try to make sense of everything. This pause gave me the time and space to reflect and ask, is this the way I want to go on living my life? While the answer is important, I found that taking the time to ask the question is more important." I love that, because absolutely, the taking the time to ask and fully reflect on what that answer is crucial. So what did you find when you asked that question?
Yeah, I found that there were changes I needed to make. I've spent way too much of my life allowing old narratives, limiting beliefs, get in my way. I've spent
Everybody does. You got to learn.
Absolutely.
You got to learn how to take them out, don't you?
Exactly. And I've spent way too much of my life sweating the small stuff. And so that was a big part of, I guess it's another big takeaway for me or lesson is, you got to find a way to just let that go. Well, easier said than done, I know, but you have to figure out a way, strategies, get support, whatever you need, figure out ways to reframe those narratives so that you can allow the best version of yourself to emerge. You can allow yourself to be yourself, which was a key lesson that I took from William and I took from this experience. Because again, we get one shot. We get one shot at this thing called life, and better to be yourself than to be someone.
Absolutely. I like that, because every individual is so individual and so beautiful and has all of these different colors. To not be yourself is just a travesty at any level. So
yeah, it absolutely is. But I, as an executive coach, I coach a lot of leaders and there's a lot of people who put on the mask,
Oh, I think everybody does. We just watched Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the theater, and it was all about that.
Yeah.
That opening number about the social masks that you wear. It's a part of humanity, clear back from the Greek plays. It's all about that mask and the persona that we put forward. So to actually take that off and to discover within yourself, to fully know who you are, and then to be able to embrace it in the way you live fully. Absolutely. Everything we're talking about here is a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I by no stretch of the imagination have conquered that. I think that is life's journey, and I'm on the journey, and it's something I work towards every day.
Okay, so I asked you about the 3 things you'd learned. One of them then was to ask that question, to take stock of your life. Am I living the way that I want to? And to appreciate every moment with intention. What's number 2?
Well, I think number 2 is around this notion of being yourself. Right?
Okay, being yourself.
Find that courage to be yourself. And if that means taking off the mask, being more vulnerable, or facing some of your insecurities or demons or old narratives, then I think we all should be empowered to do that.
Number 3. Now, in the book, you're talking about my teacher, my son. So many things you had learned from him as well as through this process. What's something you learned from him?
From him? So be yourself was one, but I'll offer another one too. And this is more in the I guess in the category of parenting. And I'll share a story to kind of
Great.
Frame the lesson, because this is about storytelling. So I'll share a story. So I would say call it 2-3 weeks after William had died, we were back home, and I had a dream. And what does happen, it has been studied, is that when someone who you love passes, they can often come back in your dreams. They call it visits. And they're very, the attributes of these visits, that they're very vivid, and you have a conversation with the person, the loved one who you lost. And so in the dream, I was kind of searching for William. I don't know if I was necessarily back in Montana searching for him. I was just searching for him. And then I found him, and we had this big, gave each other a big hug, and told him how happy I was to see him. And he said he was happy to see me. And then he used this phraseology, and these are the exact words he said: "I'm so happy to see you, but it's a shame because I can't stay. But I'm as proud of you as you are of me." I mean, it was like a gift from beyond to have my son tell me he's proud of me. And as I reflected on that, I realized, as parents, we have a lot of pride for our kids, right? That's, I suppose, obvious, but we don't realize that our kids look to us and they want to be proud of us. And our kids look at us and they look at everything we do, and they take cues on how to be and how they should be in this world. And as parents, that's a huge responsibility and privilege, because everything we do is going to be mimicked by our kids, for better or for worse. So that was kind of a reminder that, hey, our kids want to be proud of us, so we need to be more intentional, back to living intentionally about how we show up. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't make mistakes, and that's, we're human, right? But I think, when we make mistakes, own it and just be open and honest with our kids, so that they see that we're human and not these sort of.
What a lovely gift. I'm so glad you got that conversation.
Yeah. It was a very special moment.
As your healing progresses, and a year later, you and Susan have your third son, you say in another section of the book, quote, "I had to be able to hold both my despair and my happiness at the same time. I had to accept that I could be happy and sad at the same time. I could revel in the delight of holding my newborn son and at the same time be devastated by the loss of my oldest son. I could delight in sharing new and exciting experiences with Kai and at the same time be shattered by the fact that I will never be able to share those same experiences with William. I had to stop letting one feeling diminish the other. I made room for both feelings to coexist." I feel like this is a beautiful discovery, a healthy mindset that allows for this complexity of emotion on this journey. Talk to us about this idea.
So the first place where I was confronted by these competing emotions in a very visceral way was when our third son, Bodhi, was born. And I was, in the postpartum room, and they put Bodhi on my chest for the first time. And, it's a very tender and sweet moment. And in that tender and sweet moment, I had the thought, wow, I wouldn't trade this for anything, which I think is a very normal sentiment in that kind of an event. And the minute I said that, I realized, well, hold on a second. I can't say that. Can I really say that I wouldn't trade this for anything? Because the only reason Bodhi is here is because William is dead, or William died. And so that was the first instance of like, how do I reconcile that? How do I possibly reconcile that one son was born because another son died? How do I reconcile being happy that I can hold this beautiful child, infant, and then I'm totally in despair of losing William? And for the longest time, I was trying to reconcile it, but to no avail. And all that it did is that anytime I would feel happy, I would then feel guilty because I wasn't sad, or anytime I felt sad, I would feel guilty because I wasn't present for Kai or Susie or Bodhi. And I finally got to a place where I just had to stop trying. I even say this in my book. How do you reconcile the unreconcilable? Well, you got to stop trying, because by definition it can't be done. And so that's where you have to just hold both. And by accepting that truism, that's the only way forward. At least it was the only way forward for me, because they just have to coexist. That just is the way it has to be.
I think this is beautiful and vulnerable and really important, because I don't hear people talk about this very much, but I've experienced that at certain times where there's guilt if you're not paying enough attention or trying to remove thought from your mind of a loved one that's left. And there's all the managing of the guilt that goes with something like that. And obviously I have a different, everybody's going to have their own experience, but this idea of all the complicated emotions around that and being able to hold the happy and the sad in the same place seems crucial and healthy to be able to allow it. I mean, I thank you for bringing it up and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. It's, it took a while to get there, but I'm glad I got there, to be honest, because if I had not gotten there, I suspect I'd still feel quite tormented by it.
Right. I think torment's a great word for that. When you're going through something traumatic, and we'll end with this thought, but how do we not let the emotion and the trauma just take over? Because trauma by definition is something that's hijacking our emotions, right? Yeah. So it's overwhelming, and the emotion that comes from that is overwhelming. But you mentioned in the book that we always have the ability to choose our mindset. I'm always referring to Viktor Frankl with this also. You referred to him in your book as well. But, I've spoken with other people who say in those traumatic spaces, they don't feel like they have choice, Well, what's your experience with that?
Yeah. So I think, and to level set here, that took me a while to get there. I think, in the early days of my grief with William, I mean, that getting there took a while. It was in the early days, I was just consumed by emotion. I went to very dark and negative places. So you have to go through that. I think that is part of the process. You have to kind of grapple with those emotions, and I think the best thing to do in those moments, you have to learn how to be with them and not try to push them away. I think when we try to push away our emotions, particularly the negative emotions, they just come back stronger. And so learning how to be with them, and I think my training as a coach helped me with this. Is the way I did it was I meditated every day, and then I would always try to find a lesson in all of this, and then I would also take stock of where I was from a grief perspective and how I was feeling, and I would write that down in a journal. So I got into a regular practice of naming my emotions and where I was, and I think that helped me eventually get to a place of finding positive ways of reframing things and moving forward.
Thank you for sharing your path on that, because I think it's a place that we all have to navigate at some point. Knowing how other people do it is key. So anything you would like to share as we end up here, any topics that we haven't talked about that you feel are important?
Yeah, I think one of the topics I talk about, or one of the lessons I also talk about is this notion of acceptance. For a long time, I was hanging on very tight to what was, right, which was having William in my life. I was having a family at a different stage of different ages, kids who were older, kids who were more independent. And I was holding on to that. And then by holding on to that, I wasn't able to appreciate my new life, right? A life without William, a life with a newborn. And I think when we long for what is and then also hope for what will be someday, then we're just never present. And it's only by accepting what is that we're able to actually just be in the moment and enjoy what's in front of us. And that was the big lesson that Bodhi taught me, or having Bodhi taught me, because for a while in those early days of having Bodhi, it was very hard. And it took me a while to just accept that this is our new life. And also by accepting the fact that William was no longer with us, it allowed me then to find new ways of connecting with him, of building a new relationship with him that was different from the relationship I had when he was here. And I think that's a big part of the grief process, is how can you connect with the person you lost in a new way?
That's neat. What's fascinating is through this one event in your life, which of course it's a complex event, but you've just in our discussion, we've named 4 or 5 different really crucial life lessons that are important to a human as they evolve, as they become higher level, as they have a greater understanding of survival here, mortality. And everybody gets those in a different way. And some people don't get them because they'll block them out. They won't learn. But this one event for you has given you such gems, such beautiful, beautiful things. And you've looked for them and cultivated and found them. Congratulations.
Thank you. No, that means a lot. It was my way of making meaning out of this thing, right? I had a very strong need for me, like what this happened, right? So why? What's the meaning behind all this? And the best I could come up with, which is why the name of my book is My Teacher, My Son, is that I need to learn from this so I can live a better life, so I can help also others hopefully live better lives by sharing.
Which is what you're doing. Yeah. So tell us about your book. Share with us where we can get it and all the deets.
Yeah. So book is called My Teacher, My Son, Lessons on Life, Loss, and Love. And it's available for sale now on Amazon. It will eventually be available for sale in other channels in the coming weeks. But right now, the best place to get it is Amazon. And you can get it either as a paperback or Kindle ebook. And you can also, if you're interested in learning more about me, I have a website called meetnickshaw.com, which talks a little about me, about my story. I have some blog articles that I write and share, and I will also be posting different things I do in the media.
Nick, thank you for being here so much. And all of his contact information will be in the show notes on loveyourstorypodcast.com. So you can refer to that and find him as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
One of the most human things we do is to share our stories so that we can learn from one another's experiences. Today, as we are starting off into 2024, Nick has shared the story of his journey of navigating tragedy and grief so that when we face our own dark nights of the soul, that we will know how others have walked theirs. And he shared some beautiful lessons, some wonderful things that we all need to learn and come to understand. So as we are moving forward into 2024, blessings to all of you. Blessings as you face the hard things that are in front of you. Blessings as you take these wonderful, beautiful gems that we learn from and incorporate and live forward, accepting ourselves, removing the masks, living with intention, and being present in each moment so that we can fully, smell those roses, suck the marrow out of life. So please share this episode with anyone that you know who would benefit from hearing this story around the technological campfire. And we will see you in 2 weeks for the Love Your Story Quick Chat, which is the new thing we're starting this year. One inspirational idea in 15 minutes or under. That will be the second show of every month. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.